piece of cake, right?
Today on Absolute Anthem, we've got a real humdinger of an episode, a deep dive into a brand new, relatively uncut chunk of gameplay, 20 minutes of gameplay. In fact, this is the demo that the press got to see at E3. It has now been unleashed into the wild. If you want to watch it for yourself from start to finish with no interruptions, I strongly recommend you hit the link down in the description of the pinned comment below. That'll take you to the YouTube video. They've got it uploaded in glorious 4K. Indulge in 20 minutes of pretty much non-stop Anthem goodness. I will say the only thing they actually cut out, in the interest of time, more so in the interest of not ruining every single thing in the game for us, is a huge chunk of the Stronghold, which is one of the dungeon type more difficult instances in the game, which does require 4 players. We don't actually see the entire Stronghold. I imagine that's not something they want to spoil, and I'm a-okay with that. Now, we're not going to be going like second for second here, but I've pulled out a couple scenes within this 20-minute gameplay demo that I feel hold a lot of important information, a lot of valuable moments that you guys are going to want to know about, and I've also thrown in my opinion, my impressions of this demo along the way. So let's start with the very first scene, which takes place inside of our Strider. This, of course, is our forward base of operation, which we now get to see firsthand. This is how the Strider is going to function. We get some interaction with some of the characters that are going to take place in our single-player story, and we also get to see how customization works inside of the Strider. We can go up to our Javelin, see it on display. We can modify its abilities, its equipment, and also its visual appearance. I'm most excited, though, about this first-hand glimpse at the actual storytelling components. Seeing now 3 characters that work alongside of us inside our Strider: Faye, Hollick, and Owen. Now, we've heard about Hollick, we've seen Hollick and met Hollick before, we've heard Owen's voice before, but this is the first time we're seeing him. I want to talk specifically about Hollick for a second because he continues to come across as one of the strongest characters in the cast thus far. He's quite the exuberant individual. You know, he laughs and gets excited at the concept of danger. He does come across as potentially an ex-freelancer, or maybe someone who always wanted to be a freelancer, but his long-term injury, we see him carrying this cane, perhaps prevented him from doing so. Nonetheless, his laugh is intoxicating. I love his personality. I love the dialogue and the voice acting for him. This scene just right there gets me really excited about the storytelling potential of the game. I mean, this just grabs me in a way that none of the characters and any of the other big looter shooters really has. This gets me hopeful that we get a story that's, you know, on the par of Warframe. I think Warframe is probably one of the best games right now when it comes to the shared world looter shooter experience, when it comes to story delivery. They're quick, they're snappy, but Warframe stories are interesting and exciting, and they pull you into the game world. This is already doing a good job of that. I also want to point out that Faye as a character is wearing a pretty interesting piece of clothing. We see the headdress there. It's just a good look at, you know, the clothing, some of the cultural aspects of the people of the world of Anthem, and hopefully we get to see a lot more of that. I mean, that's a big thing when we talk sci-fi and film or games. You know, we want to see the clothing the characters wear. How do they dress? What has sort of inspired the looks within their cultural from a fashion perspective? That's a nice first look at it. Now, when we talk about Owen, you know, we've heard that Owen was our Cypher in the past, but we have a bit of dialogue here that points out that Owen isn't like specifically a Cypher, and that anyone in the crew could take on Cypher duty. Owen even asks who's on Cypher duty. Faye says the chair is all yours. So perhaps this is a location in the Strider where an individual sits down at a station of sorts, and they can have a nice heads-up display showcasing everything that is happening with the Javelin team when they're out in the field on a mission. As we transition from the Strider scene to the actual gameplay, we get a look at the open world. We get a brief look at a chunk of the map, and I want to say I've done some guesstimations here based on like where the mission is on the map and sort of looking at the lay of the land, the topography we see in that map there in relation to some of the other areas, and it seems like this is a pretty huge map. Like when they dive into Scars and Villainy, it is that one chunk of the map right there. And the Scars and Villainy location that we get to experience is pretty well detailed. There's no doubt that there's potential for it to overlap the other markers that we see on that map, but this seems like a really rich and a very large piece of open world design. I have a feeling we're not going to be disappointed by the scale of the world at all. That is not going to be one of the problems we're going to have with this game if any. We also get to see, for the first time, that there will be difficulty options for the mission. So Scars and Villainy, we see the players are taking it on today in normal difficulty. When we look alongside of the squad slot where it shows all of the individuals in our current fire team, we also see a screen that showcases consumables. Now perhaps these are things like XP boosts, long-term damage buffs. Maybe there's even a way to get additional credits for taking on a mission. It'll be interesting to see just what goes in that consumable slot. We also get a little bit more information on the javelins themselves. While we already know they're handcrafted, we've now been informed that they're passed down from generation to generation. So in essence, you are born into the line of freelancers, or you have to sort of come upon a javelin and somehow have it given to you from a different family. This falls in line a little bit with that medieval theory I was talking about, the idea that a suit of armor would be passed down throughout that family line. A sword, a specific weapon would be passed down through the generations in one noble family. We kind of get the same effect going on here with the javelins, and I think that's pretty damn cool. Now, as we move into the actual mission itself, there's just a whole lot going on, and I want to point out that all in all, I'm really impressed with the actual gameplay we get to see here today. While I understand that a lot of this is done in a sort of beauty play style way, as Hideo Kojima would say, the individuals demonstrating this had to do it day after day for the press at E3. They're doing things in one way to make the game, look good, to demonstrate all of the combat. They're not just going off, doing what normal players would probably do, or what they probably even do during a typical playtesting session back at the studio. They're just trying to streamline and get through the mission in the quickest possible time for the demo, and not just, spend 20 minutes doing barrel rolls or something in the air. So we don't really get to see what it would be like to constantly play really active. The Colossus spends a little bit of time on the ground, probably more time than I would like to, but again, that's not really the point of that specific character. Either tanking and being on the ground is probably going to be something the Colossus does more than the other javelins. All of that aside, though, we get to see some really good gameplay and combat variety with the Colossus itself. I particularly love its ground pound ability. It just comes across as really badass. We get to see the heavy machine gun again. We get to see the mortar ability. We also get to see for the very first time one of the super abilities, or the powers, the ultimate powers for one of the javelins. The Colossus has what it looks like just a heavy cannon that it deploys that just absolutely does some serious damage. It is this huge single fire semi-automatic cannon, just goes to town at one point with it. It looks absolutely incredible. Now we also get to see a little bit more information in regards to rarity for weapons. We see an epic pistol drop, and we also get a little bit of information in regards to legendaries. Legendaries are going to be the highest rarity in the game. They're going to be very hard to come by, but they're going to come with unique bonuses, making them, of course, the thing that are going to be most sought after. We also get to see another introduction into the storm here. Some information we've already been aware of, but a very clear demonstration now of what the storm can do. This is a light armor javelin exosuit that does elemental damage, and we get to see multiple times the lightning storm ability demonstrated. So the storm calls in a lightning strike, and that can be used in the game's combo system, which is also demonstrated numerous times throughout this gameplay demo. Frost grenades being dropped, and then the Colossus using the multi-mortar to layer in that combo damage. That reminds me, Mark Dara has confirmed those damage numbers that everybody keeps talking about. They've already implemented into the game the option to not only disable them or enable them, but also change the size and scale of them. That's right, they've been listening to the community. They made that happen in like just a month, and I think that's pretty damn spectacular. I wanted to spend some time talking about the scars, because we see them throughout this entire gameplay demo, and we now have a pretty clear indication of some of the different units within the scars faction. We see workers, scrappers, snipers. We see an elite hunter, which actually is an airborne scar type, which the player actually knocks out of the air through the use of the railgun that the Colossus has. And then we see the legendary enforcer, which is one of the heavy, really big guys that has sort of a shield made out of scrap metal. I'd also like to point out that we get to see in very clear detail here that the scars use an underground drill transport system to navigate the environment, and in this case, ambush the player. The scars are looking more and more interesting each and every time we see them, less of just like another sort of barbaric enemy type, and more of an enemy type that I'll be happy to take on, hour after hour as I dive into the world of Anthem. Now, as the game transitions into nighttime, as the players are making their way through the early portions of the stronghold here, we now know that nighttime actually brings with it nocturnal creature types that are going to inhabit the world, changing the creatures, potentially the monsters that we might fight out in the open world itself. It's going to be interesting to see just how much the dynamic of the open world changes as it shifts to nighttime, whether certain creatures are going to be more volatile, and whether or not we'll be able to hunt certain world bosses only at night or only during the daytime. Something I'm quite excited about there. Now, of course, as they're in the stronghold, again, this is the one portion of the game they don't really show entirely, we get to experience the Swarm. This is what I'm going to call them. We don't have a specific name for them yet, but they're a spider-type monster faction. The Swarm Tyrant is their boss, and that's the boss that we get to see at the end of the demo here. We finally get to see a lot more of the fight, not the entire fight, which appears to be rather lengthy, but a good chunk of it, demonstrating the weak spots for the Swarm Tyrant and sort of the rotation that we get for this fight. The Swarm Tyrant will take a bunch of damage, it'll disengage the fight, it'll send out some soldiers from the Swarm faction. The players will have to eliminate them, otherwise they'll get overwhelmed, and then the Swarm Tyrant comes in and they start fighting it again. It'll be cool to see if that Tyrant has phases where it becomes more deadly or more difficult. Again, I do want to stress that this was only on normal difficulty. It'll be interesting to see how much more damage the enemies take, how much more damage they dish out, how much more aggressive the AI is. That's going to be a big thing for me when we talk about harder difficulties with a game like Anthem. I don't just want more bullet sponges. While a little bit more health is okay on harder difficulties, I want to see the enemies be more aggressive. I want to see those soldiers swarm us more rapidly, and I want to see us get punished more often by just taking more damage in some cases. Unfortunately, the 20-minute demo comes to an end there. And hopefully we'll be hearing quite a bit more about Anthem in the coming months. John Warner himself, again, during that Game Informer interview, talked about them looking forward to the fall to show off and talk about more of the game. Expect to see a lot more Anthem, I think, in the coming months. I will, of course, be covering it here on the channel. There's a few other things that I'd like to deep dive into within this 20-minute gameplay demo, so we'll probably hit on those next week for future episodes of Absolute Anthem. All in all, let me know what you guys thought of the gameplay demonstration, if anything stood out to you as being rather spectacular. I'll say this is a very visually impressive game. I'm not just talking about the pixel count, I'm talking about the level of detail and the lighting effects, the fog. You know, when we go inside of the stronghold and we start dealing with the Swarm, there's just these thick layers of acid and poisonous cloud gases. It's a really visually impressive game. I mean, the effects, the atmospherics here are unbelievably on point. This is one beautiful world we're going to get to explore. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one.
You have been brought here for a purpose, the most important task of your lives.